Yeah, here we go. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. My name is Jason, as you know, the JTL, and we've got some painfully honest tech to talk about today. Tech so honest it hurts, I think it says on my shirt. There it is. Yeah. I have to give myself like little cue cards. Tech so honest it hurts. And today we're going to talk about the upcoming Apple event, because this is the last time we'll do a podcast before the event happens. Next week, I'm sure we'll do some kind of wrap up of what all happened. And then going to talk a little bit about the Fold, the Pixel Fold, the Z Fold 1, or no, Z Fold 5, Pixel Fold. I keep getting confused. They're both folds, but if you are a longtime viewer of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, you will recognize my co-host for today. He's like OG Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. The man, the myth, the legend. Let's see if I can get them all. The man about tech, the captain of Team Apple, and the host of the vidIQ podcast, Tube Talk. We got Mr. Vyyyper here. So it's been a long time, man. How you doing?
I am good. It is so weird because, as you alluded to, once upon a time, I used to co-host this podcast on a regular basis. So yeah. It's good to be back, man. Glad to be back with you. Appreciate you sending out the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been looking forward to getting you back on because, we always seem to have good conversations, and you do a really good job. Like I stopped by on X, Twitter, to your coffee talk, your creator coffee talk in the morning. Always there. 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Yep.
And always some really good topics that you come up with. So it's fun, man. It's fun. And I've been listening to the Tube Talk as well. And you're very good with the insights, bringing the information out of the people. So yeah, but other than that, like, we're just friends. So I'm just glad to have you here.
Absolutely.
I mean, thinking back about it, I talked with John Prosser about this a couple of weeks ago. I remember it was like 2017, 2018 that we started, doing your live streams on Friday Night Vyyyper and the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And if you told me today, well, I mean, I know it today, but it was just weird. It's like that stuff was like 5+ years ago.
Wow.
I know. When all that started, it was 5+ years ago. And I'm just like, where did it go?
Do you remember, Jason? Because you're correct. 5 years ago, when we really started doing live streams and podcasts together. But do you remember, Jason, 5 years ago, you were on a very special episode of Friday Night Vyyyper where it was me, you, and a bunch of other people, but also a YouTube tech legend, Flossie Carter. Do you remember that night?
Oh, I do. Ooh. I remember it extremely well.
Oh, yes.
There was a lot of energy in the room.
There was.
We had Roberto Blake was about to take his silver play button and just plaque people over the head.
Oh yeah.
It was crazy. In fact, I think I saw that podcast, like that particular episode of the Friday Night Vyyyper, like, came through my recommendations on the homepage the other day, and I was just like, that was a long time ago.
What?
But time rolls on. I think the reason it seems so long is because COVID like put this 2-year hole in everybody's lives.
Yeah,
where we were doing stuff, but we weren't doing anything other than like whatever we could do in our house.
Right.
It's weird, man. It's weird, but yeah. So it's been a long time. And I'm really glad you're back. What else you got going on right now?
So, as you talked about, we are just a few days away from the Apple event. I got my wallet ready. We know iPhones are coming. There might be a new AirPods Pro case with USB Type-C on the way. Cool. Obviously, new Apple Watches are coming. So it's all things Apple this week. But as we'll talk about later after the Apple stuff, I've actually been enjoying my time with the new foldables out there. I have the Z Fold 5 in my hand here, but I also have in my other room the Pixel Folds. I now have both of them. I've used both of them. I definitely want to talk about that. But first, let's get around to talking about the Apple event and what to expect, because that is the big thing in tech right now. So we can start there.
Yeah, absolutely. I just finished working on a video that'll probably be out tomorrow or over the weekend about the iPhone. And at this point, these days, pretty much we know everything. Like multiple people have leaked multiple things, and so everything just seems to be known. So I kind of have a feeling knowing about the iPhone, but then what else is coming? And really, like this, where does this leave? Where is Apple right now? Because I feel like they're in a state of transition. You know what I mean? So let's talk first about the iPhone 15. It's always so hard to talk about like multiple iPhones, but yet you have to do this. Like, well, we got the iPhone 15, 15 Plus, 15 Pro, 15 Pro Max, and you know, well, so we just learned yesterday or the day before, but pretty sure what the colors are, right?
Yeah.
I know. We've got on the iPhone 15 side, black, and then yellow, green, pink, and something else. But they're all like pastel, like light pastel colors. And usually it seems like we get like at least a one or two bold colors that people, or they sort of switch off between years. This is a year I'm not very excited about those iPhone 15 colors. What do you think?
Okay, so we need to be very intentional in how we distinguish or separate them, because I think you were
Right.
talking about the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus colors, but you got also
Right.
have the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max colors, which are different, and those are bland as I don't know what. So for the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max colors, the rumors out there are they're going to be a silver or white color. Space black is coming back. There's going to be a
Right.
new gray, Titan gray, I think they're calling it, or something Titan or
gray, yeah.
titanium. No,
Yeah.
titanium. Excuse me, titanium color. And they're also bringing back Pacific Blue. It looks like, which they brought back with the iPhone 12. Like, why?
It doesn't. It doesn't look that different. No, I mean, and every year there's been at least one iPhone Pro Max color that I've been pretty psyched about. You know,
Not this year.
like the iPhone 13 had that green color, so the two lower end models had that sort of very deep green color, and then the Pro color was kind of I think they called it clover, but to me it looked like this color of my like an army green color, and I just like that color a lot. So I was kind of into that. And then last year they had purple, and I'm a big Prince fan, so
Of course.
but
Yeah.
I will say that I was really psyched about the purple when I first got it, and then I just kind of wasn't. It didn't stick with me. I ended up giving the phone to my wife, and she doesn't care. She doesn't care at all. And the reason that I gave it to my wife, and this is something that is still the case with the 15s coming up, they went to only eSIM, and so there's no physical SIM card inside the phone. And for me, that was problematic, because when I switched to a phone to do my testing of it, I want to have my actual phone number in there and live with it like it's my phone. But getting the eSIM switched
And
takes like half a day, and
seems like it.
and so it just wasn't. I don't know why they did that, other than the fact that they didn't want to make it easy for people to switch or something. But I didn't stick with the iPhone 14 Pro Max because I just needed that. And so I've been using, on and off ever since, the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So I've got a gold iPhone, but I've been using the Pro Max since it came out. And then I used the 13 for a little while, 13 Pro Max. I used the 14 Pro Max for a little while for review purposes, switched back and forth to some Android phones, but I keep going back to the 12 Pro Max.
Mm.
So the question that I have is, when you look at the updates that they've made to all four of these phones, there's some good, There's some, and then there's some that I think are just straight up bad in the sense that, like, if you were somebody thinking about upgrading this year, this is something that would make me not want to upgrade. So the good stuff is USB-C, and the two lower end models are going to have USB-C 2.0.
Right.
And the two upper end models are going to have USB-C 4, which is Thunderbolt. And you got like some minuscule number of megabits per second with USB 2. It's not bad, but it's not fast. The lightning port was the same speed.
Right.
And then Thunderbolt 4 is 40 megabits per second.
40 gigabits, yes.
Gigabits, yes, that's right. And so yeah, it's a big difference. It's a big difference. The colors, there's nothing there that says, yeah, I gotta have that this year. I mean, everything is bland.
Yeah.
You got mostly pastel iPhone 15 Plus. And then when I saw Aaron Zolo had a picture of them laying on a table, and the way that the light was hitting them, they all looked like, except for the white one, they all looked like some shade of blue. I was like, we've got white and 3 shades of blue. And then I saw them in other pictures and realized that they were slightly different, but 2 kind of black colors in one year is an interesting choice. And I saw a lot of people posting like the most popular colors of car, and then the iPhone Pro model colors. And they kind of line up because the most popular colors of cars are white and black, blue is in there, and gray is in there. And I think those were the top 4, and everything else was like much less. I thought red would be a popular color, but it wasn't. So
here's the thing about the iPhone colors. And I've even said this publicly on Twitter. I am not a fan. I think they look bland. There's no vibrance to these colors at all. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because we don't look at the back of our phones. We look at the front of our phones. And even beyond that, I don't know about you, Jason, but me, as soon as I get my iPhone, I'm usually putting a case on it. So that nullifies any color that I might get anyway because I'm putting a case on it. So it doesn't really matter about the color. But for those people that don't rock cases, you really don't have much color options if you want the Pro or Pro Max this year. I mean,
right.
And then the other thing that kind of grinds my gears about the color options is space black. I brought space black last year, and they're bringing it back space black again this year. It's not even black. It's like gray. Like, what is that? Like, what happened to the black from the iPhone 7, the matte black or the jet black? Those 2 colors were actually black. Space black is not black. Like, what? It's gray. What is this? I don't know, Jason. It's weird.
To me, like, the 2 blacks that they put on the iPhone 7 were the best black colors they've ever used. The jet black was super cool, but fingerprints and scratches. Were all just the phone would get ruined eventually. And so they haven't. Space black to me is, like you say, kind of a darker gray. And my favorite black of the matte black phones that have the Gorilla Glass Victus or whatever, like the Samsung came out with the Phantom Black that I think they've used 3 years in a row now. And that's the best black that I've seen on any phone in recent memory.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what else is it? 200, possibly up to 200, $100 to $200 price increase on the Pro models, which, I mean, we've been living on borrowed time. Apple hasn't raised the prices for a long time, but at the same time, like, I'd like to feel like I was getting more.
You know what, Jason? Every iPhone season, there is some rumor about Apple potentially increasing the price, and it never happens or rarely happens. So I'll believe it when I see it. Now more than ever, to me, Apple doesn't really need to raise the price of iPhone because they're making money off of their services. What we got now? Apple Fitness Plus, Apple TV Plus, Apple News Plus. What is it? The Apple One bundle, Apple Arcade. Like, they're making money hand over foot off of their services, and it's increasing every year. So they don't really need to increase the price off the iPhone because if they can get people into these iPhones, they're going to make the money back on services anyway. So why do they need to increase the price?
The only reason that I can think, and it's something that I've seen over the past year or so across the board in tech, and I know inflation has affected other things, but I pay attention to tech prices, and stuff has gotten more expensive. Stuff that used to be like when I look at music gear, there was some. I've seen several products that used to be like $5.99 that are now $6.99, and so prices are going up across the board on a lot of tech products. And so I wonder if that's impacting Apple too. You might be right. They might balance it out with the services. I think it's a mistake to raise the the iPhone prices, because I mean, whenever you talk to somebody who isn't an Apple user, and they know who they are, uh, they're always like, the iPhone's so expensive. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, dude, you're carrying a $12.99
Right.
friggin' base model Galaxy S23 right now.
Mhm.
So who's more expensive now? It's so it's just one of those things, though. And USB-C is going to be good. That's going to be fine.
Right.
But no, the lower end models, the Plus and the regular iPhone 15, are getting an improved camera.
Okay.
And now again, this is all just like somewhat corroborated rumors.
Right.
We've heard all of them enough from different places that we can assume that it's got a good chance of being true. iPhone 15 Pro gets nothing. They get nothing. No camera improvement. No, it's just they get USB-C, they get faster charging, they get faster MagSafe, they get a bigger battery, but that's about it. And those aren't negative things by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of just like, you know? And then the 15 Pro Max is going to get that periscope 6 times optical, 60 times digital zoom, which, I mean, we can all admit that the zoom capabilities of the iPhone have been not so great in the past.
Yeah. When Samsung came out with their phase zoom, obviously the 100 times was a gimmick, but they had 10 times optical zoom. And I think that really changed the way a lot of us thought about zoom technology and cameras on smartphones. So
Yeah.
we have been clamoring for Apple to improve the zoom capabilities on iPhone for a while now. And it seems like we're going to finally get it this year with the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. But Jason, I'm going to say something slightly controversial, may depend on whether or not you might think it is. And I want you to let me know if you agree with me or not.
Okay.
I have used almost every iPhone since iPhone 4 because I couldn't get the iPhone before the 4 because remember, it was exclusive to AT&T.
That's right.
And I've been a Verizon customer pretty much all my adult life. So Verizon finally got the iPhone in 2011. So I've gotten, and that's when the iPhone 4 came out. So I've gotten almost every iPhone since 4. And I think you've probably had almost every iPhone for every year as well.
Mm-hmm.
But even back to the original iPhone, Jason, in my opinion, and again, I've only used from iPhone 4 on, but even I would say going back to the original, the fundamental way that we use iPhone has not changed since the original iPhone. And it makes iPhone kind of stale in my opinion. Now, yes, I know the hardware has gotten updated features, better camera, better processors, different things like that. But the software and the fundamental way that we use iPhone has not changed in over a decade. And I feel like I really wish Apple would just spruce it up, do something different. But I know they won't because they're gaining market share. So why would they change anything? But do you agree with me, Jason, that the fundamental user experience has largely remained unchanged?
Yeah, I do think you're right on that front. And the geek in me wants more stuff, right? But I think on the flip side of that coin, Apple is always trying to. Well, the iPhone is about user experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're always curating that user experience to be consistent, and anything that they change has to work in the whole aspect of it. And so that's kind of been their operating theory. Is like we're creating an experience here, and the iPhone is kind of like the hub of the ecosystem. I know everybody hates to talk about the ecosystem, but the iPhone is the hub of everything else that happens. And so they've done a really good job over the years of making the iPhone play that role.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for the rank and file smartphone buyers out there, there's a hefty percentage of them that are only going to buy the iPhone or upgrade to the iPhone because they want the same thing. They don't want to be confused by new features. There was remember when they took away the Touch ID?
Yep.
Oh my God! Anybody over the age of 50 was like, "What? How am I supposed? What am I supposed to do with this swiping?" And and it was a big deal. I mean, does the SE still have Touch ID? Yeah. So that's like the last Touch ID, and so I was fine with it. I do like the fact when you go to an Android phone, they give you the choice now. You can either have the buttons, the on-screen buttons, or you can use the swipe gestures. Sometimes I like the on-screen buttons better because I can't tell you how many times I still am in an app, like, you know, I'm looking at Reddit and I click into a story and then I want to swipe back out. Like, how many times I just try and swipe and it doesn't work, and then I have to hit the little caret to say back.
Right.
You know, so I think that the iPhone, it's sort of bland by design, right?
I would agree. Yep.
And to me, what I get satisfaction out of with the iPhone is the fact that I've integrated it into my life so much that it helps me on almost every stage of my existence, whether it's work or leisure or travel or any of those things.
Yep.
You know, I can take video footage on the iPhone and then I can airdrop it over to my Mac, and that's by far the easiest way to transfer data.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to plug my iPhone into anything because then you have to have like a cable that's just sitting there on your desk, and it's not always easy. I mean, there are flaws with iOS.
Oh yeah.
I was excited when they came out with like the app library. I was like, oh, finally, we got widgets. I can put what I want out there, and then I can have the app library. The app library sucks.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Because Apple decides what goes into what folder.
Yep.
And then they name that folder something, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know, like, is my smart lights, are they like smart home stuff or are they utilities?
Yep.
It's just, and you only get to see 3 on the top, and then maybe like 4 in a little square. But if you've got a bunch of apps and you're trying to tap into all those little app library windows, you could be looking for a while.
Yeah. It's not like Android where when you go to the app library, they just show every single app. You could just scroll and see what you're looking for. Apple's app library, like Jason said, is done up into folders, and you have to figure out where your app is, or just do an overall search. So luckily, we have that option too. You can just type in the first few letters of the app name, and they'll come up. But yeah, there's definitely limitations with iOS and how it works. But to your point earlier, I mean, as much as I say I'm bored with iPhone and I wish they would change things, I'm literally live streaming to you or with you from my Mac, my 2021 MacBook Pro. I have an iPhone 14 Pro Max. I have an Apple Watch Ultra. I have an iPad Pro. I actually have 2 iPad Pros. I don't know why I have 2 iPad Pros in the other room. So as a content creator, Apple and the ecosystem just makes my life so much easier because, to your point, when I'm shooting videos on my Sony camera and I transfer them to my MacBook to edit in Final Cut Pro, of course, I make my thumbnails on my iPad. I can shoot B-roll with my iPhone and then airdrop it to my MacBook to throw it into my Final Cut Pro video project.
Yeah.
And again, I know I'm talking about this from a content creator perspective, but even for an everyday user, gets benefits out of this ecosystem. How many of us today listeners to this podcast have AirPods?
Yeah.
If you have an iPhone, iPad instead of AirPods, your AirPods seemingly switch from iPhone to iPad depending on which device you're using at the time.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is why Apple is the king, at least in the United States and even across the globe. They are increasing their market share because they make things so seamless for their users. So it doesn't matter how boring Vyyyper thinks the iPhone is, the ecosystem is still undefeated because it just makes everything so much easier in day-to-day operation for their customers. It just is.
No, it's true. And Samsung has their own kind of ecosystem, but it's more tied to like the products that Samsung makes.
Right.
And Samsung doesn't make the same kind of products as Apple. They make refrigerators and dishwashers and all that kind of stuff. And like LeBaron has pointed out in the past, he can do all the things that the ecosystem can do with a Pixel or with a Samsung device or anything like that. My experience with trying to do that is that it's always like a couple of more steps to get there. But once you get there, you're probably fine. But with the Apple ecosystem, I mean, now you can use your iPhone as a webcam.
Yes.
Like it'll just when you go to choose a camera on your Mac, your phone is there as an option. Which to me, like that was the last thing, because iPhone as a webcam is pretty slick,
Mm-hmm.
and the webcams on the MacBooks and everything like that have been not great.
Right.
So now you've got something that has some really good hardware in it, that has pictures and video that look really good, and they keep adding these little things, and most of them maybe they're utilitarian in that they just like augment the usefulness of the device. But yeah, I mean, I just got done with playing around with the Z Fold 5, and I played around with the Pixel Fold as well, and we'll transition into that in a second. But the whole time, and part of this is that I have used my iPhone for so long, and when you go to a new iPhone, it just pulls everything out of iCloud and then makes this iPhone exactly like the iPhone that you already had.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been able to have that experience with an Android device.
Mm-mm.
You can do it with a few more steps, but I've never had it be that easy with an Android device. So I would keep going back to my iPhone, instead of doing some video stuff or some photos with the Fold or the Fold, I would take pictures or video with my iPhone, even when I was using those phones, because I could just airdrop them over.
See, Jason, there is a reason why you have to do, or it requires extra steps to do this stuff on Android. There's a reason for that. Apple controls the entire experience. They make the hardware, they make the software, so they can add all these little nuances and extra features to make the product seamlessly work together. You cannot do that on Android because Google and other companies. I mean, Google actually does own Android, kind of, but Android is open source. There's no one owner of Android. So a lot of times when you have companies like Samsung making Android phones and things like that, they are throwing their own skin on top of Android, which is an operating system and software they don't own. So they can't make everything seamlessly work like Apple because again, they're borrowing from the Android open source. They don't make Android. Samsung does not make Android. So because Samsung does not make Android, there is no way they can make their ecosystem blend as seamlessly as Apple, who owns iOS and makes iOS. So that's why everything requires extra steps on Android, because they just don't have the ownership of that software like Apple does with iOS.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, I remember when I learned about vertical versus horizontal integration of like your business. So Coke owns the entire means of production for Coke.
Mm-hmm.
Pepsi owns distribution and everything else. And so they work differently. And Apple, from the software to the hardware to the integration of not however many Android phones there are in the world made every year by different companies. It's all just for the one set like iOS is for the iPhone, and the iPhone, there's a big difference between having to make an operating system that will work with 400 different devices and for 4.
Yeah.
So it does give them the opportunity to really streamline and fine tune how iOS works. Now, I know that there are some people who are just like, I don't want to be forced into a workflow, and I get it. But to me, and I'm sure to a lot of other people out there, just having the confidence of knowing, like, I'm familiar with this because I've been using it for a long time. So if I need to use it for work, or if I need to do whatever when I'm traveling, everything is like right where I expect it to be. And like, there hasn't been an update that changed it, and suddenly I'm not, it's not there anymore, or it's something different now. Or like with Google, they changed the name of their messaging app like 3 times in a year.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, well, which one am I supposed to use?
So I want to go back to something you said. You said that there are people out there that don't want to be forced into a workflow. So basically, I took that as there are people out there that don't want to be potentially trapped into an ecosystem. And to that, I think you don't have to be.
Yeah.
There are a ton of people out there using only an iPhone, and they're using maybe Sony headphones or Bose or something else. You don't have to be stuck in an ecosystem if you don't want to. I just told you guys all the Apple products that I own and use, right? But I also have a Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 5.
Right.
I have a Pixel Fold. I have the Sony headphones on my head. So even though, yes, I am in the Apple ecosystem, I'm using other products that are outside of the ecosystem, and I can go back and forth if I choose to. So that's a personal choice. That's not something that Apple is locking you into. Just because Apple can make their product work seamlessly together doesn't mean you're trapped in an ecosystem. That's your choice. Like, you got to figure out what works best for you and then go with it. That's why we have so much tribalism online, where you got people on either side of the aisle. They love Apple or an iOS, or they love Android and Samsung and Google. It's fine. You will work best for you. That's all. At the end of the day, it's about what fits into your workflow, your lifestyle, and what works best for you and your needs. Once you figure that out, buy what you need and live with it.
I'd love to do. I know Travis MCP did a video where he took his friend's Android phone and gave him an iPhone for like a month.
Yep.
I'd love to do that experiment on like a larger scale, where it's like 10 or 20 people who are dyed in the wool. I hate the iPhone. I hate Apple. Because a lot of times what I think ends up happening is people who haven't really used the Apple ecosystem, they have heard enough about it that they make assumptions about what it's like. And at the end of the day, it's not 100% true. So, because I get a lot when I did my Z Fold 5 review, and it happened when I did another Samsung review, half of the comments are about Apple.
Yep.
And I'm just like, this is not all Samsung users, and maybe it's not even specific to Samsung, but it seems to be. They have such an inferiority complex to Apple.
Crazy. Yeah.
Or it's like Big Brother syndrome, where like Apple's the big brother and they got to prove that they can do the thing too. And so it gets really frustrating, because I don't think those people have maybe used an iPhone, or if they did, it was, years ago they got mom or dad's like hand-me-down iPhone. So I would love to do that experiment on like a larger scale and see how many people, so give them 3 categories: would switch, wouldn't hate it, and absolutely not, right? And see where we fall.
So here's another revelation for you all watching and listening. As Jason said at the very top of the podcast, I call myself the captain of Team Apple. But would you know, as I alluded to earlier, remember, my first iPhone was the iPhone 4.
Right.
So what was I doing before the iPhone 4? I was using Android. Mm-hmm. I was rooting and ROMing my Motorola Droid X. Yep. My HTC Thunderbolt. I was rocking hardcore with Android back before I ever had an iPhone, because remember, I could not get an iPhone. Yep. So I used an Android first, and I enjoy using Android, but I got to a point in my life where I'm like, I'm tired of rooting and ROMing my phone. I just want to use something that just works. So I switched to the iPhone, and I pretty much have not looked back. Even though I still use Android today, I don't do half the work I was doing 10 years ago with Android that I was doing back then. I don't do that stuff anymore. because once I started using iPhone and saw how much simpler and easier it was for me to use, I wanted more of that. I'm like, yo, I don't want to be rooting around with my phone anymore and worrying about breaking it and voiding warranties and all that stuff.
Yep.
Give me something that just works. So that's why I started using iPhone. Well, because of the hype and the ease of use. And I enjoyed my experience on iPhone and I stayed with it. But again, I still use Android today because I like to have the best of both worlds. But again, before I was using an iPhone, I was on Android.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I are in kind of a unique position because, we talk about this stuff and we work with this stuff all the time. So it's not unusual for us to have access to both.
Right.
A lot of people out there are making a real decision.
Yep.
Like I'm going to pay for this for the next 2 or 3 years. So I gotta make the right choice. And I remember when I got my first Android phone was the Samsung Captivate.
Ooh, I remember that. Wow.
Yeah. So the Captivate, each carrier had their own version of this phone and they were
Yeah.
all called something different. But that was officially the original Galaxy S phone. So that was like Galaxy S1. And that thing was impossible. I think it was like first or second generation Android phone. Android itself still had a lot of bugs to work out at that time. The phones weren't powerful enough to run the software. So you had to do stuff like, if you wanted to get rid of the factory skin that was bogging the phone down, you had to root your phone and then you had to put on another ROM or something like that. And I remember spending hours doing that stuff because I don't think I got an iPhone until the iPhone 6. I think that was like my first iPhone because just for me and my family, I was in grad school. I was like, working as a teacher, but not super regular. So paying an iPhone price was kind of could have done it, but better not to. So I was using HTC One, LG V10, all the way up to the time that I got my first iPhone. And so the iPhone 6 and 6S, well, those were the days because that's when we still had a headphone jack. And the 6S, the 6 had its bending problem. And then the 6S they made it stiffer. So it was kind of better. I think the iPhone 7 was pinnacle iPhone of that design. Maybe just because I like those black colors, but and then the iPhone 8 all the way up. The iPhone 10 still is like kind of that was a pretty special phone. But speaking of the iPhone 10, and this is the reason why, when you talk about upgrading, I feel like more people are hanging on to their stuff a little bit more these days.
Yep.
And the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, iPhone 10 are losing support, like upgrade support for iOS this year. Those phones came out in 2017.
Correct.
And just to think that if you've been using them since you've been using these phones for 6 years, right? If you're still hanging on to your 8 or your 10 or anything like that, you've been using these phones for 6 years. So now you think like, okay, do I upgrade? I'm sure there are people who upgrade every year, and then there are people who are like, once I get it paid off, I'll upgrade. And then there are the people who are just like, I'm gonna ride this thing until it dies. And so, those are the people who should start thinking about, like, is it time to upgrade? And even the 15 again is just like not real. We'll see next week on Tuesday what it's really all about. But to me right now, it's seeming very much like an S year, And for anybody who doesn't remember the S years, that was like when Apple would put out a new number, and then the next year they would just call it that number S.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like we're still making our plans for the next big version of the phone. They've gone away from that now since the iPhone 11, right? And it's weird to think that, okay, so iPhone 11, was that the last sort of rounded version of the phone? And then the 12 started the squared off versions?
No,
Or
they're rounded. Like the rounded has not changed. The iPhones are still rounded today.
no, but I mean, like, so we got this sort of flat slab kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and like the iPhone 6, 7, 8 were like the same, but more sort of pebble like,
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But I think one of the common themes since they've gone away from the S year is it doesn't, one year to the next doesn't build a ton of anticipation, right? So when you're in the middle of an S year and you've had your iPhone 11 or your iPhone 10s for a year or 10 for a year, and then you're living through 10s and waiting for 11, you build up 2 years of anticipation. But since they've gone away from the S, I don't know that people get as excited from year to year.
Okay. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier. The fundamental user experience of the iPhone has not changed since the OG iPhone.
Right.
Now, it's a little different for me and you because we kind of upgrade our phones every year. So we don't see much change from one year to the next.
Right.
But if you're upgrading this year from maybe an iPhone 11 or an iPhone 12 to the iPhone 15, you'll probably notice a little bit of a difference, especially with the newer cameras and the updated processor and things like that. But again, your fundamental experience of how you use iPhone will not change, which provides us a perfect segue into what's happening right now on the Android side with foldable phones. Now, whether you think they are fad or whether you think they're here to stay, this is the 5th generation of Samsung Galaxy Z Fold, which means they thought they had enough success to make 5 generations of these. So clearly, Samsung has identified something in the market that shows them that people are buying these.
Or they're
Earlier,
going way into that.
What's that?
Or they're going way into the hole.
Yeah, right. But they made 5 of them. And Google just introduced their Pixel Fold. I wish I had mine, but it's in another room. But I have the Z Fold 5 and I also have the Pixel Fold. And this is the change that I think a lot of us hardcore nerds were looking for. It's something different because this operates vastly different from an iPhone as far as how you use it, because you got it unfolds, you got different features on Android and different things like that. But I kind of want to talk about my experience with both the Pixel Fold and the Z Fold 5 here. So if you see what's going on here, this whole like cover display right here is very tall, it's very narrow. I'm not really that big of a fan of it, but I also have used the Pixel Fold, which has more of a, like a passport style form factor. It has a larger cover display. It's easier to use regularly. When I'm using my Pixel Fold, I barely unfolded it because the cover display for me did everything that I needed the phone to do, even though I had access to the bigger display. This phone, I almost exclusively use open, although now, after having used the Pixel Fold, I see why what Samsung was going for with this thinner, narrower cover display. It's not meant for long-term use. It's meant for quick things like scrolling Twitter or websites. It's not meant for typing out messages, although if you do switch from Samsung keyboard to Google keyboard, you got a little bit better experience, so I like that. But this cover display works how it's supposed to. I don't like it. I wish it was wider, but it works as intended for this device because this device is meant to be used like this. It's meant to be used open. And once you open this device up, it is a whole new experience, you all. Like, just going back and forth between the Pixel Fold and the Z Fold, even though I like the form factor better on the Pixel Fold, the foldable software and the way that apps are optimized on this phone makes it an overall better experience. A lot of apps on the Pixel Fold are not optimized to take advantage of the whole inner display. So if you use something like Twitter on the Pixel Fold, it's like kind of in the middle, and it's like a phone app, but it's in the middle, so you got black bars on either side.
Yep.
You use the Twitter app on here when it's open, it takes up the entire display, which makes it better for things like using, let's say I'm using Twitter here on the Pixel Fold or on the Z Fold open up. If I want to watch a YouTube video and tweet at the same time, it's a better experience on here because then that YouTube video I can put off to the side and I can still enjoy the relative full experience of Twitter. That's a little bit more difficult to do on the Pixel Fold when the Twitter app is kind of shrunken into a regular phone app and you want to watch a YouTube video on top of that, then you are possibly covering the Twitter app on the Pixel Fold, whereas we're here, you got more room, so it's not that big of an issue. So just little things like that Samsung has learned over the 5 generations make this a much more better foldable experience overall than the Pixel Fold. Although I love the Pixel Fold. It's a great first generation device for Google. I hope they don't stop it at 1. I hope they make a 2 and a 3. But using both of them, it's clear that this is the superior foldable. And just because Samsung has had 5 generations to iterate and make it better, and they've done the work.
Yeah.
Not to mention it has the S Pen support as well. So you got that too.
Yeah, that was the thing for me. Like when it got S Pen support last year, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And I did. Like I wasn't going to get the Pixel Fold, but I ended up getting it just because the curiosity was killing me. And I wanted to use that different form factor. I wanted to try something different than the Galaxy Fold versions. I've used the Galaxy Flip too, but to me, I know a lot of people like the Galaxy Flip because it's more compact. But if I'm doing Galaxy Flip, I'd just rather have a regular phone.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
I've had the Motorola Razr in the past. And it wasn't a perfect world at that time. But here's what got me ultimately with both the Fold and the Z Fold 5 this year. They both cost the same amount of money, $17.99.
Right.
And once you buy a case and, maybe another couple of accessories or something like that, I mean, that Galaxy Z Fold 5 case with the S Pen is $100.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't want to keep rubbing it in, but Apple's leather OEM cases were never $100.
Never, no.
And so I get it. You're getting the S Pen and the case that Samsung has designed specifically for the thing. I get it. I get why they have priced it that way, but it to me it's like the prices that they're asking for the Folds now, plus whatever accessories you got to buy. So you're looking at $2,000 with tax. And both of those phones don't have the best cameras that those companies can offer. So if I want the best thing that they can get, if I'm paying $500 more for the Fold and not the S23 Ultra, then I want the best camera.
Fact.
And so ultimately that's sort of the uncanny valley of the Folds for me. Is you're paying top dollar for some features that are not quite there. And to me that's a bad deal. And so I still feel like while they are cool and I enjoy playing with them every year, I end up not using them and giving them back.
And you're justified because, to your point, if you're paying $1,800 for a phone, for a Samsung device, you expect that $1,800 device, which is their most expensive phone, to have the top of everything. And to your point, it doesn't. Not to say that the cameras are bad, because they're actually quite good on this device, but they're not S23 Ultra quality for the most part. Right. They're not. They're just not. The hardware in the S23 Ultra cameras is better.
Yeah. And
you end up getting better pictures because of it. So why are we paying so much extra for this just for the fact that it folds, but we get inferior hardware? I don't know why they can't put the best cameras in these things. Again, that's something that I would expect for a first or second gen, but this is the 5th generation of this. Yeah. You should have figured it out by now, Samsung. Like, what are we doing here? Like, there are other foldables from the Chinese OEMs that have figured it out, and they're putting their best cameras in their foldables. But for whatever reason, Samsung has not reached that level yet. And to your point, Jason, until they do, it's really hard to recommend an $1,800 device that's going to get you potentially, or not potentially, that's going to get you inferior hardware in some levels than your regular slab device gets you. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if you buy a Mercedes and instead of leather seats and like fine crafted wood trim and stuff, you get cloth seats and plastic. Right. I mean, it's like, yeah, I got a Mercedes. It's a one of the most desirable cars in the world, but I got the one with like the plastic dashboard.
I mean, is it a Mercedes or is it a Honda? What are we talking about here?
I know. That's the thing. And so for me, while I like the idea, and the times that I've used them, it hasn't been transformative enough for me to be like, yeah, I gotta keep this. Now, if you're a customer who goes and like on Verizon, it's a 3-year deal, right? And so you're paying $50 a month on a 3-year deal for one of these foldable phones. Maybe it doesn't feel as much of a big deal to like not have the best camera, not have the best this or that. But when I got the Pixel Fold and when I got the Z Fold 5, I paid cash money. And when you spend over $3,000, $3,500 or so on a phone, on two phones, it's like it hurts when you think about, well, what would the best camera be like? After you put that money out, it does kind of hurt. So I still think that the foldables are very interesting, and I think that people, the tech enthusiasts, is that the euphemism that we use? They're not tech nerds or tech geeks. They're tech enthusiasts. The tech enthusiasts are into it because it is something different. And, for the last 10 plus years, smartphones have been like the it tech. I don't think that they're not there now because they've kind of flattened out and become commodities on some level, but the folds are different. But to me, they're not different enough to warrant the price. So either they get like top of the line across the board for that money, or they come down. And
they need to come down.
That's when I can recommend them over like an S23 or a Pixel 8 Pro, is when I can say like, oh, they have all the same stuff, but this one has a cooler feature and it's only an extra $100.
Now, to your point, to be fair to Samsung at the very minimum, and Google too, to some extent, besides the fact that you can buy these foldables on a 3-year deal and pay monthly for them, Samsung usually at launch offers some very generous trade-ins. This year, they were offering up to $1,000 off of the Z Fold 5 if you traded in any number of phones that got you that $1,000 off. So a lot of people, if they're pre-ordering and doing it the correct way, will never pay the full $1,800 if they trade something in or something like that. But yeah, just at manufacturer retail price, still too high.
Yeah, for me, when I look at those deals, I mean, it is a good deal. Samsung is losing money on that deal, or they're way overcharging for that phone. One or the other.
Oh yeah.
Like if you can get that phone for $800 because you just traded in like, a 2-year-old phone that you've been using for 2 years, then why don't you just charge me $800? Right? I mean, because that's like the shell game that all these phone companies are playing. Is you're giving them the phone that you have, and they're saying it's worth $800, $1,000, and then but you're still on the hook for the same monthly price, right? So you're still paying, and no matter how many times you trade in an upgrade, you're still paying that price, and it'll the roosters will come home to crow or whatever at some point. And that's why I say, like, okay, if you can give me this phone for $800, then just give me the phone for $800. Maybe they've still got to be making some kind of profit margin on that, right? So it's Samsung, Google, Apple, all of them are doing this sort of like leapfrogging thing in order to keep every year's stats up, so they can go to their board of directors, they can go to their shareholders, they can go to whoever and say, well, sales were up this year. They don't say sales were up this year because we offered people an extra $200. It's like we gave them $1,000 instead of $800 this year. So I get it from a business standpoint. I get it from a user standpoint. And I think at least my hope was that foldable phones would like transform the smartphone and give us something brand new. And while it does add a facet to the user's experience with the phone, it doesn't make me feel like I've got to get rid of this to have that. I don't have to get rid of my slab phone in order to have that. I don't got the FOMO like I probably should if I was gonna upgrade and daily drive a foldable phone. So I don't know, because if the foldable phones aren't the next thing, then what is? And now it's we were talking about Apple before. Like, Apple has released some pretty game-changing products in their computer lineup over the past few years, and now they're coming out with Vision Pro. And I seem to talk about Vision Pro like every podcast. So, but to me, Vision Pro is sort of like the Pixel Fold for Apple, in the sense that they've taken all of these things that they do well, and then they're going to put them in one device. It's not going to be a device that everybody buys, and I don't think Apple has the wherewithal to, even if they wanted to, they couldn't produce enough to sell to everybody that owns an iPhone or whatever. So they're coming out with this. It's going to be $3,500 plus whatever it costs to get the lenses, whatever it costs to get, all the different stuff. So we're probably looking at a $4,000 device.
Yeah.
And a fraction of Apple users are going to actually buy this. But I think in 5 to 10 years, Apple Vision Pro 8, that it's going to be down to a size where it's not, you're not wearing ski goggles, right? And then I have a feeling that what we're going to see is the Apple Watch becomes sort of the brains of the Vision Pro and the watch. And slab phones like this maybe won't be the regular thing that people use. So I don't know, man. I think eventually we're going to be like implanting the Vision Pro inside of our eyeballs.
That might be going a little bit far, but yeah, it's definitely going to change the way that we use technology. I personally don't think it's going to be the thing that everybody thinks is going to be in year one, in iteration one. Not that big clunky headset, absolutely not. But if they can refine it and change the form factor, and ultimately what I would like is for them to end up with a pair of glasses, then we can talk. But this thing they got coming out next year, I'm not interested. No, thank you.
I'm interested just because I love stuff like that. And, I've been sci-fi fan for many, many years. I've read almost every William Gibson novel. And William Gibson is the guy who came up with some of the terminology that we use to this day when we talk about technology and the internet and those kinds of things. And he wrote the books where he did that. He wrote in like the early 80s. So I've always been interested in that. And that's kind of what gets me excited about tech is like how it's going to impact our daily lives in a really significant way. Like, smartphones have totally changed everything, right? I remember seeing this image, like a illustration of everything that used to be on a desk that's no longer on a desk and is just inside your smartphone. Like your Rolodex and and all these other things that used to take up a space on your desk, and now you got a laptop and a phone. And so that to me is like transformational. When you grow up with a landline, and then suddenly the landline goes to a cordless phone, and then you get a cell phone, and then you get the smartphone. And as they improve, there's so much that you could do inside of a smartphone that this might be a fun experiment as well. Like, try and live a week or two where you have like an external keyboard and a mouse, and you just use your phone. Now, Samsung has DeX, and DeX can work that way easily. But I don't know. It's a very interesting time in tech, because I think everybody recognizes who makes YouTube videos or works as in tech or as a journalist with tech. Everybody knows it's kind of slowed down, over these past couple of years. The pandemic actually sped things up, but at the same time, tech companies didn't anticipate that, so they slowed down the production of like the semiconductors and everything like that. So we're kind of living through this slower period right now, but we're ripe for something that feels like this is the next thing. And so I'm excited about that, honestly. It's going to be a pretty interesting thing to deal with. I mean, I was talking when Michael Fisher was on last week, and we talked about maybe foldable phones don't stay in a frame like they are right now, but instead they become just like a piece of foldable glass. Maybe you make a wrist cuff out of it, like instead of carrying it in your pocket. So it's a very, very interesting thing. And I look forward to seeing what Apple does this week. I hear that we got a new iPad Mini, maybe. We've got iPad. You said earlier, what was it? AirPods Pro case with USB-C,
right?
And new Apple Watch. So Apple Watch 9. And do you feel like it's confirmed that we got Apple Watch Ultra 2 coming?
There seems to be some chatter about that. I'm not sure. Although the other thing is that Apple seemingly does not like the number 9, so we're probably going to see an Apple Watch 10. Not going to be a 9, I don't think.
I guess that's true. There never was an iPhone 9. That's right.
Nope.
So yeah, I don't know, man. But let's wrap up here, as we used to do, by talking about what we're enjoying in the world of media. What are you watching on TV right now?
Oh, what am I watching on TV? So I just got access to Hulu, so I've been watching the Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles on.
Oh yeah,
Hulu. It came out like I think almost a decade ago. I think over a decade ago, but I've been enjoying it because I recently watched the first 2 Terminator movies, so I want to watch the more Terminator stuff. I've been getting into that show, so pretty good show.
Yeah,
that's what I've been watching.
It was. My wife was way into it. She loves the Terminator movies. So she was way into it when it was on TV, and then I think it was the writer's strike of that time that killed that show, if I recall correctly, because there was going to be another season, and the writers went on strike, as they are now,
right?
And it just everything got kind of kicked to the curb that wasn't already like deep into production. So, yeah, that was a good show. There were a bunch of good shows around that time. And,
what are you watching?
I watch a lot of YouTube, but nothing tech related. I watch a lot of like music gear stuff, but in terms of shows, I'm trying to. I started to watch the last bit of this first season of Invasion.
I need to watch that.
Yeah, I only watched like the first 2 or 3 episodes when it came out, and so now I've got that. I also watched like the first couple of episodes of Suits, because that's a TV show that I never paid attention to.
That's a good show.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the first 2 episodes. So I watched that. What else am I watching? I just got Spider-Man Across the Universe in HD Blu-ray. So the 4K Ultra HD, whatever they call it. And I got a new TV for my studio.
Ooh, what TV did you get?
I got a Hisense U7K, I think it is, and it's a 75-inch.
I recently got a 65-inch Sony A95K. That was the best TV of last year, but I got it earlier this year, about a month or 2 ago. Been enjoying it.
Yeah, I was in this position. Like, we got a Sony. I think it might be the same TV. We got it like 6 months ago or something. Same as you. I like it a lot. It's
nice.
Beautiful TV.
Yep.
I wanted to get either a 70. Like, it was the thing. I could get a 75-inch, but not as nice a TV, or I could get another 65-inch, but higher end. Now this U7 that I got is the next to the top of the line Hisense TV. And I hadn't used Hisense TVs for a while now. TCL has now for a long time been known as like a good, nearly as good budget TV compared to the big three, Sony, LG, and Samsung. Hisense is, I think, maybe taken over TCL now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and where I got turned on to it was Hisense got in touch with me, and they wanted me to take one of their short throw projectors, 100-inch screen, short throw projector, and then I did a review of a surround sound system. So they were pairing these two together in a discount, and they wanted me to review the projector. And holy crap, that projector was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem was when we moved to this new house, there wasn't really any place I could put it. Like my studio's in the basement, and the basement ceilings are probably 8 feet tall. But if you've got a 100-inch TV, if you've got a 100-inch screen, and then you have to have a certain ratio of like where the projector is to the screen, I couldn't quite get it right. But at that point, I knew how good Hisense could be. So I started paying attention to the TVs. And I didn't want to spend more than $1,000 because we already got one really good TV. And so you could get this Hisense U7 on sale at Best Buy, $99.99.
Mm.
And I wasn't sure, but it looks really good. So I watched Across the Spider-Verse in 4K Ultra Blu-ray, and let me tell you, those Spider-Man movies, the two animated Spider-Man movies, are just so incredible to watch. And I felt like when I watched it in 4K Ultra, I could see a lot more of the weird colored things that they were doing, and I could see a lot more maybe it was because of the 75-inch TV as opposed to and I'm closer to it than I would be with our other TV. But visually, absolutely incredible. And I have an HD Blu-ray player.
Ooh, so you get the best image quality. Yeah.
I found it. It's a Sony, and I found it at Best Buy last year for open box for half price. I think it was like $200 instead of $4 something.
Nice.
So yeah, man, really appreciate you being here again. It's always fun. We used to do this every week, people. Every week. Sometimes for like 3 hours.
No, but man, thank you for making the time again. Thank you for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. So what are you doing next? How can people get in touch with you? Where do they find you? And sign up for all things Vyyyper?
Just type in The Man About Tech on Google and you'll find me. Pretty simple.
Awesome. Yeah. So once again, thanks, people. Let me turn up my theme music again. Oh yeah. Appreciate you all being here. If you're watching on YouTube, do subscribe, get those notifications going so you can come back and see every week a new episode of the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. Otherwise, you can find us on Spotify right now. I haven't figured out how to get my RSS feed back to go everywhere else, but Spotify is actually a pretty cool platform for the podcast uploads. So do find us on Spotify, and thanks so much for being here. Once again, Jason, Painfully Honest Tech, Tech So Honest It Hurts, with the man about tech, the captain of Team Apple, Vyyyper. Until the next time, we're out.